Hey everyone, what's going on? Professor Leis here. In this video, I'd like to walk you through this activity that we're posting to the discussion board. So just a little bit of context. This activity is adapted from a textbook that I use in my English 100 courses called Habits of the Creative Mind. Now, we're doing this activity because it's a very useful strategy when trying to figure out a structure for our essay projects. And so we're doing this activity even though it's from another textbook that we're not using in our course. So let me just explain this and walk you through it, and we'll go from there. The following activity is adapted from Richard E. Miller and Ann Juresik's Habits of the Creative Mind, 2nd edition, and this is an activity called Practice Session 1, Part 1, Structure After the Fact. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your most recent draft of Major Essay Project number 1, and you're going to use it to conduct this activity. So a little bit of context. So in Habits of the Creative Mind, Richard E. Miller and Ann Juresik write, in school, the operating assumption is often that there is one structure with which students should work: introduction, body, conclusion. Note that this approach begins by prescribing an organizing structure, no matter what the subject or project is, where professional writers show structure emerging after the research process is finished or well underway. We think that the best time for you to make decisions about structure is after you've formulated the question you want to answer, the problem or puzzle you want to solve, or the idea you want to explore, and after you've taken time to do substantial research. Once you've gathered your materials, then you can experiment with how to organize it for your readers. So for this major essay project, what our challenge is, what we're trying to accomplish with this essay, is to analyze our TED Talk and explain why we think it's effective. Or ineffective in some cases. But like I suggested, I really recommend that you choose a TED Talk that you do think is successful. So that's our central mission. We're trying to explain why we think the TED Talk is successful. And so that's the question or problem that we're trying to accomplish or get across in this, right? Now you've all completed draft 1, and so you've already begun to do the work on this, right? You've already begun to do some research, and in this case the research is just analyzing the TED Talk, right? Watching it again and again, paying close attention to it. That's research. That's considered research. Okay, so you've created your draft. Now we're ready to think a little bit more concretely about structure. And so let me get into the activity, what Miller and Juresik explain here. So the activity, get a set of index cards and make a card for every section or paragraph of your project. Those you've already written and those you are planning to write in order to finish the project. Set the cards out on a flat surface and then organize them so that they represent the structure you think best suits your project. When you've mapped out a structure you think works, step back and think carefully about what you see. So in other words, what you're going to do for your most recent draft that you have, you're going to take a set of index cards or post-it notes, or you could even take a sheet or two of paper and cut out pieces, little squares or rectangles to create little cards. But it's important that they are cards that you can move around and kind of play around with. So for every section or paragraph you've included in your most recent draft, you're going to create an index card that's going to just give a brief indication of what that section is. What's the point you're trying to get across there? So you're going to do that for everything you already have in your draft, and then you're going to create cards for the things that you know you need to include in your next draft, right? So you're kind of taking a look to see where you've come from, what you've already accomplished, and then you're looking ahead and sort of envisioning what other points or ideas or sections you need to include as you continue to work on your essay, right? So you're going to have cards that represent everything you already have, and then cards that represent everything you plan to include, or think you might plan to include, right? So then once you have those cards created, you're going to lay them out on a flat surface, so your desk or a coffee table or even on the floor, and you're going to arrange them in such a way that you think is the best structure for your essay. Now keep in mind, they're on index cards for a reason, so that you can play around with them, right? You could shuffle them up, you can move them around. So I really do encourage you to play around and see if there are other possible structures that you can potentially build into your essay than the one that you have already begun to create in your first draft, right? So once you've done that, I have some questions here, or rather Miller and Jurassic include some questions here for you to think about. And these are the things that you're going to include in your response that you will then post to the discussion board, okay? So pay attention to these questions. So they write, which shape is the path? Is it straight and simple because you're writing a descriptive essay? There's this and that and the other thing. Given the assignment or your ambitions, is this structure sufficient? So pay attention to the way you've connected your ideas. Is it in the sort of and this and then and then and then? That's something that is characteristic of the listing effect, which we want to avoid, right? So if you're noticing that's the way you've organized your points, then that's something that you'll want to try to revise in your next draft. Does the path of your project take interesting turns? Is there a step that takes your thoughts in a new direction? Are there turns that might pivot on a qualifying word or phrase, such as but, however, or on the other hand? So this means, do you bring up sort of alternative interpretations or new ideas that maybe your reader might not expect you to bring into the essay, or things that they might not expect you to point out in the TED Talk you're analyzing, right? So pay attention to that. Does the path does the path turn more than once? Does it double back on itself? Does it have a lowercase e structure? Does it braid 3 or more strands together? So a little bit of context. I know that we haven't read this in our class from Habits of the Creative Mind, because that's not our textbook, but what they mean by this is, do you play around with the chronology of the points in your essay? Meaning, do you maybe start at one point and then kind of go back in time a little bit to look at something that happens earlier, and then maybe jump back to the future a little bit to talk about something that happens after your starting point? This structure is very common in movies. A lot of movies do this, where they kind of do flashbacks, jump back, they play around with the chronology of how things work. You can do that too in this essay. You don't need to explore your points in the chronological order that they appear in the TED Talk. You could bring them out of order. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Is there a fork in the path? Is there a moment where you entertain multiple options? So this might mean, perhaps there's an example you're analyzing from the TED Talk where there's two possible interpretations, and so you're exploring both interpretations. And so that would kind of create a fork in the path, which could be something really interesting. So if you notice that, or an opportunity to do that, I encourage you to play around with it. Are there gaps? Does the path abruptly change direction or miss a step between a given section and the one that follows? So this is just asking you to pay attention to the way that you've connected ideas. Are there connections that maybe aren't very clear, or perhaps you neglected to make that connection to begin with? And so there might be a hole in your argument in that way, and so that might be something to pay attention to. Do you need to fill that gap in with some sort of explanation or connection? Are there piece of ideas that don't fit anywhere? Does it make sense to include such material as a digression that eventually leads back to the main path? Would a digression contribute to the essay's overall project? So you might notice where you incorporate a point that perhaps doesn't seem to connect to everything else you're exploring in your essay. And so there's a point where you might want to say, you know what, I need to either figure out how I'm going to connect this to the overall point I'm making, or perhaps you need to cut it out, and that's okay. Is there a dead end, a place where the path hits a brick wall or goes off a cliff? If so, Can you use this dead end to rethink how you've addressed your essay's question or problem? Maybe you've reached a point where you really can't go any further in your analysis. You just have reached a metaphorical wall in that sense. You don't necessarily need to view that as a bad thing, but you'd want to see, is it beneficial for your essay? Do you want to point that out to your readers? If not, perhaps you need to double back and see what you want to do at that point, or you need to figure out how to move beyond that metaphorical wall. So once you've responded to, you've thought about these questions in your reflection, you're going to take a picture of the essay, or I'm sorry, of the structure that you've decided. So you're going to take a picture of your index card. So you can use your cell phone or whatever, take a picture of it, and then you're going to embed that image into your report. Okay, in your report, you're going to entertain these questions up here. So take a picture of the structure you've created with your index cards, embed that image in a document, and then write a report about what you've learned from looking at the organization of your project in this way. You may want to number any places in your diagram to help your reader follow your observations. So in other words, you may want to number your index cards. You could say, oh, card number 2 or card number 5 or whatever the case is. Okay, so going back to the particulars of this activity, so you're going to post this, your post for this discussion will be your report, which should be at least 150 words in length. Once you have posted your report with a picture of your index cards included, please embed the photo into your post rather than attaching it as a separate file. I want you all to embed photos in these discussion posts rather than attaching them as separate files, because that way I don't need to download the photo to my computer in order to see it, and others don't need to download the photo to their computer in order to see it. But if it's embedded in your post to begin with, nobody needs to download anything because the photo will just show up. And I'll show you in a moment how to do that, just to review. So you're gonna, once you've posted your report with the photo of your cards embedded in it, you're going to reply to at least 2 colleagues' posts. What questions or observations do you have for your colleagues? Can you offer them any advice or feedback? So your initial post is by the Wednesday deadline, and then you can take the remaining days of the week to respond to your colleagues. So by the end of the week, by midnight. So when you're ready to post your report here, what you're going to do is you're going to click the reply button, and then your text box will appear, and you're going to go ahead and copy and paste your response into it. Again, I don't recommend that you compose it directly into the text box because it might get erased, but save it in a Microsoft Word doc or Google Doc, and then copy and paste it into your into this text box. And then when it's time to embed the image, you're going to go up here to the top menu bar, okay, to this icon here. It's a little photo icon. It says images. You're going to click that, and then you're going to then click and drag the file, the image file. You're just going to drop it right there, and then it will appear, and then you'll press submit, and you can then resize it according to how big you want it in your post. Do not attach it as a separate file, okay? Again, if you do this, that means that it's not going to just appear and that I need to download the photo to my computer, or your classmates need to download the photo to their computers, and we just want to avoid that. So please embed the image so it just appears automatically. Again, this is how you do it. Click on that and go from there. And then you'll go ahead and just click the post reply button. All right, y'all. If you have any questions, obviously let me know. You can send me a message on Canvas. And if you need an extension, you know what to do. All right, y'all. Have fun with this activity, please.